Hey everybody, Derek here. I'm here to bring you another video for The Walking Dead Season 5. And today what I wanted to do is I wanted to do a video basically giving my thoughts on whether I think they killed the hunters off too early in this season of Walking Dead. As we know, 2 weeks ago they did kill Gareth and the rest of the Terminus slash hunters off of the show. Um, and they definitely did a very good job of, fleshing that story, in my opinion. Definitely made it very shocking. But, 1 week afterwards, after looking at the hospital and a couple of other things, I wanted to give some early thoughts on some of the pros of it and some of the cons of it because in some ways I think they did a great thing, but in other things I think that maybe it might have been a mistake. So I just want to weigh both of those options, basically. So, um, some of the pros of it, in my opinion, are one, The Walking Dead definitely, I think learned a little bit from doing the governor's story. Taking the governor and doing those extra episodes last season with him may not have been the best thing for the story. I mean, I was personally okay with the governor still having some story, but I think they didn't really go about it in the best way. And I think they didn't want to, stretch out the hunters any more than they had to. They kind of wanted to, make their presence strong on the show, make us, get as much as we could out of them, and then, get rid of them by killing them off. And I think that they definitely did that. I think they definitely milked about everything that they possibly could have from what I was looking at from those 3 episodes. And I guess if you want to count the season 4 finale, I guess you can as well. Because one of the things that I realize is if Rick's group would not have broken out of Terminus by the end of the premiere, I think that premiere would have been an absolute disaster. I just could not see there being any way that you can drag that out 2 or 3 episodes and expect us to, receive that in a positive fashion. I think it was great that they broke out in the very first episode. They showed who they were. They were cannibals. They were killing people. They were, draining them of their blood and doing, basically getting them prepared for dinner. That's pretty much what they were doing. And I just, if they would have stayed inside of Terminus for several episodes, it definitely would have been a waste. So I think they definitely paced that out correctly. And something else I wanted to note about is certain villains definitely have longevity, like the governor, and like a brief, scary storyline, but they can get old really quick, like the hunters. And one of the things that I noted was by the end of the 3rd episode, there was really no way of making the hunters any scarier than they already are. I mean, they demonstrated that they had the ability to draw people in. They're human, so you don't really expect that people are going to be behaving in this kind of fashion, You don't expect that when you see a human that they're going to knock you out and eat you piece by piece. That's just not something that we think of all the time in a zombie apocalypse. So they definitely had that as a threatening, characteristic, that trapping them, beating them, over the head with the baseball bat was definitely very shocking. And then by capturing Bob and cutting off his leg and eating it, you really reached the peak of all the things that they could do with the hunters. You don't really need a whole backstory with them. That's kind of like why I thought the flashbacks were a little bit of a waste of time, because we really didn't need to go back and see what happened before. It wasn't necessary. We realized, hey, they're bad people. Along the way, they realized they needed to resort to cannibalism in order to survive. They're sick individuals, and that's all you really need to know about them. We don't need to go back and figure out anything else. I mean, you don't really need to explain the backstory as much as you might for someone like the governor. But, one of the things that I was looking at was, again, I think that they made them as shocking as you possibly could have. What are they going to do? Kidnap somebody else and eat them? Then it's just repetitive and it's boring. And it takes away the shock value. It's more like, oh, well, now they captured Rosita and cut her hand off, and oh, they captured Abraham and cut his left foot off, and blah blah blah. Nah, it's boring. There's it doesn't have the same impact if you do it over and over and over again. And they demonstrated that, that that's what their goal is, that all they want to do is be able to hunt people down and kill them and eat them. So I definitely think that in many respects, they really did a great job as writers of not stretching the storyline out farther than it needed to be. On the other hand, though, did they do it too quickly? And there were a couple of things that I was thinking about, just after watching the last episode. We're 4 episodes in at this point, and I might do one later on to, sum everything up because it is a little early. But one of the things that I'm really concerned about is, can the hospital really be any scarier than it already is? Or, excuse me, let me rephrase that. Can the hospital be scarier than the hunters? I guess that's more of the better question. Pardon me. And I wonder that, can they really make the hospital scarier than the hunters? And I just don't think they can. And one of my concerns is that, you have such a great, villain in the hunters, and then you end it with a subpar, villain with these people at the hospital, and they're not great people. I mean, they take people in, they keep them held hostage, and if you're, they may, rape you and do terrible things to you in order to, make them happier. It's a very sick, unfortunate circumstance for a lot of people that are there, but I don't think that they're as scary. I mean, for some individuals, and I don't mean to be offensive, but for some people coming in there, that's more of an ideal, circumstance for them. That they don't mind, contributing to the group. And I mean, depending on the type of person that you are, you might go in there and you're more valuable. Like for a guy like Dr. Steven, it's a very valuable place for him to be at. So, it's not necessarily scarier than the hunters who are going to, hunt you down and eat you. So, one of my concerns is how can they really keep it as interesting, with people that I don't really know can be as good of a villain as the hunters. And that's something that I am concerned about. In these last 4 episodes, it seems like they are, really separating things up again. Like I think next week is just about Abraham's group, and then I think after that I've heard rumors that it's just going to be Daryl and Carol. And I feel like, them separating things up again, it might be a good thing, it might not be, but I'm just concerned about whether they can make it as exciting with these people at the hospital. I One of the alternative things that I was thinking about was, what if instead of bringing the hunters back into the forum right away, what they could have done was focus on, Rick and the group getting away from there, because in the comics they don't appear, the hunters, until after the group is already on their way to Washington. And they might, I don't even know if they were in the state of Georgia. I think they might have gotten out of there by then, but they were not in the same area. And one of the things that I was thinking about was, well, maybe you could have, focused on them doing something else and perhaps have Rick and the group meet up with Gabriel, do all that, and then by the time you rescue Beth, you're on your way, and the hunters may have been pursuing them and caught up with them later, and then you could have had a cat and mouse game with the hunters later on, like in the spring. And I can see why some people might not have been receptive to that, but I think that in some respects it would have, built up more to a, shocking display. They could have done the same storyline with Bob later or with another character. I think that might have been a better choice. And I don't know if it would have been proper to have the hunters disappear and then reappear, because, I mean, Gareth does get shot by Rick. We could have played it up that, oh, they're dead and, that's at that, and then have them reappear later in the spring as the hunters, and the whole storyline could have taken place over 4 episodes in the spring, and then they could have made it to the Alexandria safe zone. I feel that could have been just as well received as doing it right away, because again, my concern is I don't really know how they're going to be able to keep these next 4 episodes entertaining with a group like the Hospital. Now they may surprise me. Again, I'm not, obviously, you're going to have your various different thoughts as you're watching the show. And I think they've done a great job with it. And I think what they did with the Hunters was a very good thing. But, you have to wonder, could they have saved them until later? Because one of my big concerns about the later half of this season is, are we even really going to have a villain? Because the Hospital's obviously not going to, follow them to Washington. That's not going to happen. But what are they going to be able to do in order to keep it exciting while they're getting to Washington? Because in the comics, the Hunters, again, are when they're on their way to Washington. So if they don't get some kind of interesting story for the later half, then it may get boring. So to make up for that, they may have to, flash forward a little bit here. One of the things that I was thinking about was maybe by the end of this fall season, they deal with the Hospital. That's all done. They take off for Washington. And when we come back in the spring, they're like in Virginia or Maryland. I mean, I was thinking that might have to be what happens unless they can come up with a really good story. Because that's one of my concerns is now that we don't have the Hunters, and we're obviously not going to have the Hospital following them all the way to Washington. That just doesn't make any sense. How are they going to keep it interesting? So they may have to skip over the entire, journey and just pick it up with, hey, we're almost there, and then, do its storyline there. So definitely some good things and some, maybe some not so good things by killing off the Hunters early. I think they did a great job with the story, though. There's no way that you can, really say that they didn't flesh that story out very well. I think that they really made them shocking. They really did a great job of portraying Gareth and the other Hunters. They gave a great story for Bob, and, it was sad to see him go, but, it was definitely a great storyline the way that they did it. And I do have confidence in the show. I mean, they haven't let me down yet. And they obviously haven't let down a majority of the audience because the ratings are just as high as ever. I mean, approximately 14 million people watched last week. So, I mean, it's pretty clear that, they're doing things right. But we're just, this is just predictions. This is basically just some, concerns as you're watching the story. I think they did a great job, but again, it leaves you to wonder, could they have done the story later on in the spring and kept it just as interesting? So maybe yes, maybe no, but I'm going to bring this video to a close and I'm going to put the ball in your court. What do you guys think? Do you think they killed the Hunters off too early? Do you think they should have saved them until later? I mean, again, in the spring, I think it would have been a great storyline to have them follow the group along to Washington. I think that they might have been able to make it work. Do you think they could have, or do you think it was more appropriate to deal with them right away? What are your concerns about later on in the show, or do you think that I'm worrying too much and it's going to be great? Don't be afraid to share your thoughts. I love hearing your guys' comments. I want to thank people who have been watching and have been putting comments down in the videos. Don't stop. I love them. I love being able to chat with you guys. I try to answer as many of them as I can. So, let me know what you guys think. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please do so. I have more videos coming. And if you have a video topic that you would like, don't be afraid to suggest it. Suggest it. Can't talk today. Thanks, everybody. I hope you all have a wonderful evening. Thank you.